What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're taking another look at the Nike Metcon 1s. Those of you that have been around long enough might remember that the very first video that I put up on YouTube was on the Nike Metcon 1s. Way back in 2015, when the shoes were just about to come out, Nike sent me one of their athlete packages that came with some shorts, the shirts, tights, and the OG Volt Metcon 1s. I will forever be grateful to Nike for sending me this package because it's what really kicked off my reviewing career. At the time, no one else had a video out on the Metcon 1, so I felt like it was my responsibility to come out with a video on these shoes. And it was my first video, and as expected, it was terrible. It was absolutely trash. And everybody let me know in the comment section how bad the video was. It was so bad that I eventually just ended up unlisting it from YouTube. I still have it, but it's not something that I ever want to bring back out because of just how bad it was. Fast forward almost 10 years, and here we are doing another video on the Metcon 1s, hopefully better than my original first impression video. So today, we're gonna be taking a look at the Metcon 1 re-released in the band colorway, and I'm going to be giving you my first impressions as well as the differences that I noticed between this new re-released model and the original models. They're not a complete Protro, but they're not exactly an OG, so if anything, they would probably be a retro version. Now, to give you a little bit of backstory on the band colorway, this shoe came out in 2015, and that's when Reebok was still the title sponsor for the CrossFit Games. That year, they had announced that nobody could wear anything besides Reebok at the CrossFit Games. So in retaliation to that, Nike came out with the band colorway with the slogan, "Don't ban our shoe, beat our shoe." Eventually, Ben Smith ended up winning the CrossFit Games that year and beating out Matt Frazier. So technically, Reebok did beat a Nike athlete, but they did not beat a Nike athlete wearing Nike shoes. With that said, let's actually talk about the Metcon 1 re-release. So at first glance, you'd be hard-pressed to notice any real differences between the 2024 model and the 2015 model. It took a lot of kind of peeping around the shoe for me to even find any differences, but there are some key changes. Some small ones, but there are some notable ones as well. So taking a look at the toe box, we do get the updated toe box fabric that was quickly changed after the Metcon 1s came out. The originals had this softer material, softer mesh in the toe box that wore out very quickly if you rode a lot. The rower straps would just completely demolish that part of the shoe. The new mesh is a lot more heavy duty, but it's still very flexible and it's really breathable. On top of that mesh material, there's an overlay that goes around the toe bumper that is kind of like double stacked because there is an increased amount of material that is in the very front of the shoe. With the original releases, this could delaminate over time. It's not something that happened to me personally, but I have seen it on like other people's shoes. Coming around to the lateral side of the shoe, we have the red swoosh logo, which is another overlay. And then around that, there is an overlay that kind of protects the mesh. That texture is a little bit more prominent than on the originals. Now, taking a look at the ankle collar and heel area of the shoe, there is kind of like a microfiber material that's soft to the touch, and then inside of there you have some cushioning around the ankle, but it's not a lot of cushioning, and I wish they would have added some more at the heel area because of the dreaded Metcon 1 heel slip. It is still present with these shoes. There is no external heel collar, but there is one there that's kind of like under this overlay. And then at the heel part, there is no like heel clip or anything. This was before they started adding those into shoes. But there's only this piece of foam that is not actually the midsole. Now taking a look at the top part of the shoe, which has flywire lacing on both sides of the shoe. You have 4 flywire eyelets, and then you have a normal eyelet at the very bottom. The shoe has a nice fit around the midfoot, but the problem about the Metcon ones was that it had some pretty decent heel slip. So I wish that they had gone in there and corrected or adjusted the top eyelet so that that strap would lace maybe a little bit further towards the heel of the shoe. But it's not an actual Protro, so I guess that's not something we could really hope for. The laces themselves are actually a really nice flat lace that stay tied well, and they have a white flake to them, which gives the shoe a nice little pop in addition to the white outsole. The tongue is a thin tongue. It has some cushioning on it, and it's gusseted on the sides. It stays in place and it doesn't get in the way. Coming back to the heel of the shoe, for a small detail that I missed was the pull tab is a different material. It's not as nice feeling as the original Metcons. Like, it's not as thick and soft. It's a little bit more thin and rigid. Now, it's a small detail and it doesn't really change too much, but I just thought I would highlight it there. A small detail that you might miss is that the inner lining of the re-release is a little bit more rough than the softer inner lining of the original release. It's probably not something most people are going to notice or really even do anything to affect the way that the shoes feel, but it's worth noting. Another little material change is that the Strobel material, which is the lining under the drop-in midsole and on top of the outsole, is slightly more tacky on the re-release. Now taking a look at the outsole of the shoe, which features pretty much the same sticky rubber. It still has all the sticky rubber markings on the sides. It still has the raised lateral and medial sidewalls to give you stability and also protection and traction for rope climbs. It still has the little outriggers on the side that protrude to give you more contact with the ground. And one of the best features of this shoe was that ground contact, because it's got a very flat profile. So the heel virtually has no rocker. There's almost no toe spring angle on the shoe. There's only some forefoot flex grooves that let the shoe bend more in that area. There's really nothing at the heel. The tread pattern is just a flat tread pattern that has hexagons that are solid in certain areas and then broken up in other areas to give the shoe more flexibility. The grip on the shoe has always been really good in my opinion, and I didn't think that the outsole needed any kind of work. Now, one of the only differences that I noticed with this outsole in comparison to the previous one, and it's something that I'm just going from memory, is that the outsole has like a fleck to it now in certain areas. So I'm assuming that they're doing the like Nike Next Nature thing with the shoe, where it uses like a recycled rubber for the outsole in comparison to the originals. Now take a look at the drop-in midsole, which has always been a mainstay feature of the Metcon line of shoes. It was in them from the 1s all the way up to the 6s, the 7s, or when they started putting a normal midsole built in to the shoe. But before that, we always had the drop-in design, which allowed for greater durability on the outsole. For rope climbs, you wouldn't have to risk tearing up the actual midsole that was built into the shoe. At first glance, the drop-in midsoles look identical between the original models and the newer models. The only difference that I could kind of visibly see is that the newer ones maybe look a little bit more shiny than the original ones, but all the original markings are the same, and it's still a 4mm drop. Now, when I put on the bands yesterday, I noticed that they were a lot softer than I remembered. And I thought I was going crazy, and then I went home to try them on with my original pair, and they indeed are noticeably softer than my original pair. And it's a pretty noticeable difference. I think it actually does change the feel of the shoe a good amount. And besides the change in density, it actually also feels thinner, so your foot sits better inside of the shoe. It does decrease the heel slip a little bit, but like I mentioned earlier, the heel slip is still a problem. When it came to weight, I didn't really notice a huge difference, but the new ones actually weighed a little bit less, not a ton. I weighed my size 10.5 at 11.9 ounces in comparison to my originals that weighed in at 12 ounces. All right, so when going to size your Metcon ones, I'm gonna recommend that you go with your current Nike sizing. I always thought the original Metcons ran a little bit on the big side, and the 10.5 in the originals does indeed feel bigger than my re-released versions. My re-releases actually felt pretty snug from the start, but after a little bit of wear, pretty much just one day's workout, they felt very comfortable and a lot more broken in from when I first put them on. So when picking your size, I would just go with what you are currently wearing in like your Nike Metcon 9s, your Reds, your Strike Haze, your Nano 14s, or whatever even nanos you're coming from. And you might not want to trust your original Metcon size if you had the original Metcons. Now, I've always thought the Metcon 1s and 2s had a pretty wide toe box, and it's the same with the re-release. I don't think that that new inner lining really changes the width of the toe box, and I felt like these were very comfortable for my feet at least, which don't really have a lot of width throughout my foot except at the metatarsal area, which I think is pretty comfortable in these shoes. Now, if you do have wide feet, then I might actually recommend going with a half size up with the Metcon re-release because of its kind of smaller fit compared to the originals. But for pretty much everybody else, I think going with your most current training shoe sizing should be the move with the Metcon 1 re-release. A lot of people are going to complain about the heel slip with the shoe, which is a valid complaint. One thing that I have done to kind of mitigate that heel slip is I'll take the top eyelet and lace through the front of the shoe so that you can get better back pressure on your foot when lacing these shoes up. It actually does a good amount to lessen the heel slip. It never completely goes away, but if you have issues with heel slip, that's definitely something you're gonna wanna try. Another little detail that I forgot to mention was that these shoes are still squeaky. So if that's something that really bothers you, you could put baby powder under the drop-in midsole and it'll make the squeak go away. But honestly, it's not really that big a deal to me. It's never something that has bothered me in any of my previous Metcons. But I mean, to each their own. If that's something that bothers you, try the baby powder trick. Okay, when it comes to flexibility and running, Metcons have historically never been that good. I think the Metcon 1s were actually not that bad for running though. The weight of these shoes is what makes them totally tolerable to do any of the runs that you find in a CrossFit workout, like up to 400, 800 meters at a time. Now, when I put these on yesterday and I noticed that the midsole was softer, I thought to myself that, hey, I might actually want to try doing a longer run in these. That's something that I never thought of with the previous Metcons. The actual difference in the drop-in midsole is noticeably softer and it feels comfortable to wear these for extended amounts of time. Are they going to be a good running shoe? Absolutely not. I wouldn't do anything more than a mile in these shoes, but I think even up to a mile they should be okay, especially because they're not that heavy. The issue with them is that they just have a really flat contact outsole and they can feel a little bit clunky, but if you're a 4-foot striker, it's probably not that big a deal. For any of the runs that you're doing in a CrossFit workout, 400, 200, 800, and especially with the new Feel drop-in midsole, they're definitely going to be more comfortable than the original models. When it came to like double unders that I did yesterday, I found that they did just fine. My feet never really got lit up from doing the sets that I was doing yesterday, which wasn't a lot, but I was doing like heavy rope double unders and I felt like I was able to track the rope just fine. I don't even think I broke on a single set, and I didn't notice my feet getting uncomfortable through the sets. Now keep in mind that this is a first impressions video, so I can't deep dive too far into what I think these shoes are going to be good for, but they honestly don't feel that much different than the original Metcons. They are definitely more comfortable to wear and they have a softer feel underfoot. a lot of the way that the shoe feels otherwise is the same. So when I took these shoes to do my front squats yesterday, I noticed that they were just as stable as I had remembered. The only kind of shakiness that I had was when I did my walkout and I was kind of moving around a little bit. But once I got planted and I started my front squats, there was no issues in terms of power delivery. I really like the drop-in midsole with this shoe, and as I did before, but I don't think that the newer kind of softer drop-in midsole really detracts from lifting at all. I also did some power snatches in these shoes yesterday, and I was reminded at how good the Metcon ones were for Olympic weightlifting movements. Ground contact was excellent, the grip was excellent. I felt like I was able to keep my feet securely planted on the ground while I was doing my pull, and then extension was snappy. They felt extremely responsive, and my catches were solid because of the amount of grip and ground contact that the shoe provides. I normally also don't do this with shoes that I first get, but I know I had to try them out. I had to rip the Band-Aid off the wound, and so I tried these out for some rope climbs yesterday, and once again, they were as good as I remembered. Metcon 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s were all really good rope climbing shoes, and it's no different with the Metcon 1 re-release. Grip going up the rope was great. Coming down the rope is, once again, great, but that's not necessarily what you want coming down the rope because it becomes hard to slide down the rope, and I just noticed myself kind of wanting to jump off the rope instead of sliding down. All right, so the Metcon 1 re-release drops on August 2nd. This pair was supplied to me by Box Basics, so I'm gonna give them a plug right now. If you're looking for anything when it comes to training shoes, definitely check out Box Basics. They will have these on launch day in limited quantities, and they for sure will fly because these are probably one of the most hype releases or re-releases in a long time. Plus the colorway, come on, it just goes super duper hard. If you missed the original Metcon 1, I definitely recommend that you check these out. They're not a complete Protro, but the changes that they made to this re-release make the shoe actually feel better than it did before. It's a little bit more easier to live in, and that was the complaint that people had with the original Metcons, was that they were just a little bit stiff, or the drop-in midsole was a little bit stiff. This new one is soft, and I honestly would not mind wearing these shoes all day long. It doesn't detract from the ability to lift in these shoes, which is still one of the high points of the Metcon 1s. So for those that might want a more simplistic shoe, or those old heads that are just looking to relive their glory days, I definitely recommend checking out the Metcon 1s when they drop. Once again, this is a first impressions, and I will do a detailed full-on review of the Metcon 1s. So if you have any questions about these shoes and you want me to answer them, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.